Leave a comment sharing your financial situation to support prosperity and subscribe to my channel. I'm counting on your help to spread the message of Jewish wealth. Hello, I am Rabbi Jacob Adler, and today I need to reveal to you one of the most profound and comforting truths of Jewish tradition that has remained hidden from many for decades, an ancient wisdom about the soul's destiny after death that not only brings peace to the grieving heart, but also completely transforms our relationship with money, generosity, and the legacy we leave in this world. During my 40 years of studying and teaching the financial principles of Jewish wisdom, I discovered something that may sound disturbing at first, but will be absolutely liberating once you understand its deep meaning. Ignorance about the true path of the soul after physical departure has led people over 45 to make devastating financial mistakes, spending fortunes on unnecessary rituals, impulsive donations driven by the despair of loss, or hoarding wealth out of fear of death without understanding the true spiritual purpose of material resources. I want you to understand something fundamental today. If you have lost loved ones and feel that your financial situation has drastically deteriorated since, or if you live in constant fear of death and this affects your decisions about money, you are not alone, and you are definitely not lost. You have simply been misguided by a culture that exploits the fear of death for profit, instead of teaching the true path of spiritual and material balance that our sages left us millennia ago. This crisis especially hits those who have faced significant losses and, in their desperation to honor the dead or find meaning in life, made financial decisions that left them vulnerable, destroying the very thing their loved ones would have most desired, their security and dignity in this world. Let me tell you about Rose, 52, a retired nurse who cared for patients for 30 years with the heart of a true caregiver until life confronted her with her greatest pain, the sudden loss of her husband Charles in a car accident. Rose and Charles had built a nest egg of $80,000 together, the fruit of decades of honest work and careful saving, money that represented not just financial security, but also the dreams they planned to realize in retirement, the trips they would take together, the house they would renovate, the tranquility they deserved after so many years of dedication to work and family. When Charles passed away unexpectedly, Rose entered a state of despair that led her to mistakenly believe that by spending everything they had saved on memorial services, promises, donations to different religious institutions and various rituals, she could ensure his well-being in the afterlife, and perhaps even find some relief for her own unbearable pain. In just 8 months, Rose spent the entire $80,000 in a desperate succession of attempts at spiritual connection, $15,000 on monthly memorial services for a full year, $20,000 donated to an institution that promised to pray for Charles's soul for 1,000 days, $12,000 spent on a trip to a renowned spiritual retreat center in Sedona, where she believed she would get a divine answer about her husband's fate, $8,000 on consultations with different mediums and spiritual counselors, $10,000 donated to a charity in Charles's name, and the rest frittered away on special candles, religious objects, and other promises that touched her wounded heart, but emptied her bank account. Today, 2 years after Charles's passing, Rose lives with her daughter, dependent on her charity, relies on anxiety and depression medication she cannot fully afford, and lives with the bitter discovery that not all those services were actually held, that the religious institution that received $20,000 invested the money in administrative renovations instead of prayers, and that her desperate generosity brought neither peace to her heart nor dignity to her life, the exact opposite of what Charles, who always valued financial responsibility, would have wanted for her. When Rose came to me earlier this year, she wept and said with a voice choked with guilt and regret, "Rabbi, I destroyed everything Charles and I built together trying to help him in death. But now I feel I've also betrayed his memory because I'm living in dependency, exactly what he always wanted to avoid for us. Is he watching me go through this humiliation? Did my financial sacrifices even alleviate any of his suffering?" I took Rose's trembling hands and answered with all the firmness and compassion I could muster, "My child, you were deceived by those who profit from the desperation of grieving people. You loved Charles deeply, but no one taught you that there is a sacred way to honor the dead that strengthens the living instead of destroying them. Your husband did not need your $80,000 to find peace in the spiritual world, but you needed it to maintain your dignity in this physical world. and that is what he would most desire for you. This is the first fundamental truth I need you to understand today, which can completely transform your relationship with grief and money. The despair of loss makes us vulnerable to exploiters who have turned our natural need to honor the dead into a profitable business that benefits only the unscrupulous living, while harming both those who have passed and those who remain. Our sages knew this millennia ago, and that is why they created specific teachings about Olam Haba, the world to come, not as a distant physical place that needs to be bought with our money, but as an elevated state of existence where the soul continues its journey of spiritual elevation, regardless of how much money we spend on external rituals. I want you to reflect with me on something I discovered studying hundreds of cases like Rose's. Have you ever noticed how there are people and institutions that seem to have a special radar for identifying who is grieving and vulnerable? They don't seek out people who are in mourning but have solid spiritual knowledge or clear family guidance. They don't approach those who have already set boundaries on how to honor their dead. They have an almost predatory instinct to detect who is willing to spend any amount if they believe it will alleviate their pain or benefit their deceased loved ones, turning our sacred need for spiritual connection into an inexhaustible source of profit for those who exploit others' suffering. Carl, a 58-year-old accountant, was living in a completely different but equally financially destructive situation. When he lost his mother after a long battle with cancer, Carl fell into a deep depression that led him to the opposite extreme of Rose. He simply stopped managing his own finances because he believed that nothing mattered anymore since we're all going to die anyway, so why worry about money? For 2 years, Carl completely neglected his financial responsibilities, didn't pay taxes, failed to honor work contracts, spent impulsively without any planning, and accumulated debts of $45,000 because his pain had turned into a destructive philosophy that life had no meaning, and therefore money had no importance either. Carl discovered in the most painful way that financial depression does not honor the dead. It only multiplies the suffering of the living, creating a cycle of self-destruction that certainly would not have been his mother's wish, who had worked her whole life as a seamstress to ensure he had better opportunities than she did. What Rose and Carl discovered, and what I want you to discover before you go through the same unnecessary suffering, is that both desperate generosity and depressive negligence are distorted ways of processing grief that harm our ability to truly honor our loved ones through a dignified and prosperous life. They did not understand the fundamental Jewish concept of zekut avot, the merit of the ancestors, which establishes how our responsible financial actions and our balanced generosity create a chain of blessings that benefits both the living and those who have already passed. But this wisdom has been hidden because many traditions preferred to exploit the fear of death to get donations, instead of teaching the true path of spiritual and material balance. For years teaching these principles to people like Rose and Carl, I discovered that there is a hidden wisdom in the sacred texts about the true destiny of the soul after death, that, when understood correctly, not only brings peace to the grieving heart, but also lays the foundation for a prosperous and balanced financial life that honors both the living and the dead. This wisdom was deliberately obscured because there is a gigantic economic interest in keeping people ignorant of the true spiritual teachings, turning our natural grief into a source of profit for those who market false hopes and unnecessary rituals. I want to explain to you today the fundamental concept of Olam Haba, the world to come, which is not a distant physical place where we need to send money through earthly intermediaries, but an elevated state of spiritual existence where the soul continues its journey of elevation regardless of our current financial situation, and how this understanding radically changes our perspective on money, generosity, and the correct way to honor those who have passed before us. According to the millennial teachings of Jewish tradition, when a person leaves this physical world, their soul does not simply disappear or go to a place where it needs our financial assistance to find comfort or elevation. The soul enters Gan Eden, the spiritual garden where righteous souls enjoy divine proximity, or a temporary process of purification called Gehinnom, which is not a hell of eternal punishment as many traditions mistakenly teach, but rather a state of spiritual cleansing that can last at most 12 months, a period during which our good deeds, especially tzedakah done consciously in memory of the deceased, can accelerate this process of the soul's elevation. But pay close attention to what I am about to reveal now, because this is the key that can save your finances and at the same time truly honor your loved ones. Tzedakah done consciously does not mean spending everything we have on desperate rituals or impulsive donations motivated by guilt and fear, but rather establishing a balanced and sustainable system of generosity that preserves our own dignity while creating genuine spiritual merit for those we love and have lost. The hidden rule I want to share with you today is the principle of Zekut Avot, the merit of the ancestors, which establishes a fundamental spiritual truth. Our responsible financial actions and our intelligent generosity create a current of blessings that flows to both the living and the dead, connecting generations through conscious choices that strengthen our spiritual lineage instead of destroying it through self-destructive sacrifices or depressive negligence. This principle has been deliberately hidden because many institutions discovered that it is more profitable to exploit the desperation of the bereaved than to teach them how to honor their dead through a prosperous and balanced life. Let me explain how Rose could have applied this wisdom in a completely different and much more effective way for both herself and Charles's memory. Instead of spending the $80,000 all at once on desperate rituals and donations, Rose could have established what we call a sacred memory account, setting aside 10% of that amount, that is, $8,000, for tzedakah distributed over 10 years, which means $800 a year, designated for causes that truly help people in need, thus creating a constant flow of good deeds in Charles's memory that would last a whole decade instead of being depleted in 8 months of despair. The remaining $72,000 should have been invested conservatively and safely to ensure Rose's financial stability for the rest of her life, allowing her to honor her husband's memory through a dignified and independent existence, exactly what Charles, who always valued financial responsibility, would have wanted for her. This approach would have created a lasting legacy for Charles through Rose's sustainable prosperity, generating far more spiritual merit than all those impulsive expenditures that left her dependent and humiliated. Carl, in turn, could have transformed his pain over his mother's loss into a financially responsible life project, setting annual goals for financial organization and professional growth as a way to honor the sacrifices she made working as a seamstress to give him better opportunities. Instead of accumulating debt through depressive negligence, Carl could have created a family legacy fund where he would deposit a fixed amount monthly, intended for both his financial stability and for projects to help other children who have lost their mothers, transforming his personal pain into a force for healing and generosity that would benefit both his own recovery and other people going through the same situation. I want you to deeply understand the fundamental difference between tzedakah, which means justice and is a sacred duty based on responsibility and sustainability, and Christian charity, which is based on emotional compassion and often leads to impulsive decisions that harm both the giver and the receiver. This understanding frees us from the destructive guilt of not giving more than we can sustain and teaches us to give intelligently, balancedly, and lastingly, creating a real and positive impact that honors our dead through the prosperity of the living. Ignorance of these fundamental teachings has led millions of grieving people to make disastrous financial decisions, either donating everything they have out of desperation or becoming miserly out of fear of death, when Jewish tradition offers a perfect middle path through the concept of ma'aser, which literally means the 10th part, establishing that we should allocate 10% of our resources to tzedakah, but always after ensuring our own basic security, including housing, food, health, education, and a solid emergency fund. Maimonides, one of the greatest sages in human history, a physician, philosopher, and scholar who lived almost 1,000 years ago, established 8 different levels of tzedakah. And I want you to understand that the lowest level, the worst of all, is not giving little, but giving unwillingly, or giving more than one can sustain financially and emotionally, because this eventually creates resentment in the heart of the giver, teaches dependency to the beneficiaries, and most importantly, prevents future opportunities to continue helping over time. When Rose spent all $80,000 in 8 months of despair, she practiced the lowest level of tzedakah according to Maimonides, because those impulsively given resources not only failed to truly benefit Charles's soul, but also destroyed her ability to continue being generous in the future, creating dependency and humiliation where there should have been dignity and sustainable prosperity. The Jewish belief in the resurrection at the end of days, Techiat Hamatim, teaches us that the body is a sacred vessel that deserves to be treated with the utmost respect throughout our journey in this world, including not destroying it through the financial stress caused by unprocessed grief or irresponsible economic decisions motivated by the fear of death. Because our physical body is the vehicle through which we fulfill our spiritual mission and create merit for both ourselves and our ancestors. I want you to deeply understand this revolutionary spiritual truth. Honoring the dead is living with financial dignity. This is not a selfish justification for hoarding wealth, but a fundamental spiritual law that governs the relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds. Our departed loved ones do not need our money to find peace in the Olam Haba, but they benefit immensely when our prosperous and balanced lives generate waves of blessing that spread through the generations, creating a legacy of wisdom, responsibility, and sustainable generosity that honors their memory in a way infinitely superior to any impulsive spending motivated by the despair of grief. Now, I want to teach you the concrete and transformative practices I have developed over decades of helping people like Rose and Carl find the sacred balance between honoring their deceased loved ones and building a prosperous and dignified financial life that would be a source of pride for those who have passed. The first fundamental practice I want to share with you is what I call the Memory Shabbat, a sacred weekly period of 25 hours where we completely disconnect from daily financial pressures to meditate deeply on the legacy we want to leave and how our money decisions can truly honor our ancestors instead of destroying our own future through unprocessed emotional impulses. During this sacred period, which should begin at sunset on Friday and end at sunset on Saturday, you should not pay bills, you should not make purchases, you should not make important financial decisions, you should not even think about money as a source of anxiety or worry, but rather use these precious hours to serenely reflect on the values your loved ones most cherished and how you can incorporate them into your financial life in a sustainable and balanced way. Rose, after learning this practice with me, discovered that her husband Charles had always valued financial security not out of greed, but out of love for his family and a desire to protect those he loved from the hardships he himself had faced in childhood. And this understanding helped her to stop feeling guilty for wanting to rebuild her economic stability, transforming this need into a sacred way of honoring her husband's deepest values. Carl, in turn, used these moments of Memory Shabbat to reconnect with the lessons of his seamstress mother, who always told him that honestly earned and wisely saved money was a way of respecting one's own work and ensuring dignity in old age. And this reconnection motivated him to emerge from his financial depression and begin reorganizing his economic life as a living tribute to his mother's sacrifices. The second revolutionary practice I want to teach is the creation of the sacred memory account, a specific financial system where you automatically set aside a fixed percentage of your income each month, never more than 10% and never less than your real ability to sustain, intended exclusively for conscious tzedakah in memory of your deceased loved ones, thus replacing impulsive and desperate spending with a constant and sustainable flow of generosity that perpetuates over the years and creates far more spiritual impact than any single, impoverishing donation. This account should be opened at a different financial institution from your main accounts, should have a name that specifically honors the memory of the deceased person, should grow monthly through automatic deposits that do not depend on your emotional discipline in times of intense grief, and should be used exclusively for causes that truly transform lives instead of feeding bureaucratic structures that profit from the suffering of grieving people. Rose established a sacred memory account called the Charles Baker Family Protection Fund, where she deposits $200 a month, an amount that represents exactly 5% of her current retirement income, and which in 10 years will total $24,000 destined to help families who have lost their main provider, thus creating a lasting and growing legacy for Charles that benefits people in situations similar to the one she herself faced. Carl created the Maria Education and Dignity Fund, where he deposits $300 monthly, an amount he can comfortably sustain after reorganizing his finances, intended for scholarships for the children of seamstresses and manual laborers who wish to have better educational opportunities, thus perpetuating his mother's dream that education was the path to a more prosperous and dignified life. The third transformative practice is the sacred ritual of the financial yahrzeit, an annual ceremony held on the anniversary of our loved one's passing. But instead of being a day of impulsive spending, motivated by longing and guilt, this day becomes a sacred opportunity to review our complete financial situation, assess our progress towards stability and prosperity, adjust our tzedakah goals for the coming year, and celebrate economic achievements as a concrete way of honoring the memory of those who have passed through our own material and spiritual elevation. During the financial yahrzeit, you should light a special candle, sit in a quiet place with all your financial documents organized, do a complete balance of your income, expenses, investments, debts, and goals for the future, and then establish specific and achievable commitments for the next year that demonstrate how you are using material resources in a dignified and responsible way, exactly as your loved ones would wish you to do. Rose transformed the anniversary of Charles's death into a day of celebrating her financial achievements, where she reviews the growth of her sacred memory account, plans the next year's donations, organizes her retirement and investment documents, and ends the day by thanking Charles for having taught her the value of financial responsibility, feeling connected to him through her conscious economic choices, instead of feeling guilty for building a new, prosperous life. Carl uses this day to visit his mother's grave, not with expensive flowers and empty promises, but with a detailed report of his financial recovery, of the people he has been able to help through his education fund, of the young people who have received scholarships in Maria's name, transforming the moment of mourning into a joyful and proud accounting of how he is honoring his mother's values through concrete and sustainable actions. The fourth fundamental practice is what I call the Family Legacy Fund, a long-term financial strategy where you establish a specific reserve that grows over the years and can be used for both family emergencies and special tzedakah projects, thus creating solid financial security that also functions as a permanent source of generosity, demonstrating how personal prosperity and social responsibility can coexist harmoniously when based on solid spiritual principles instead of destructive emotional impulses. This fund should be constituted by at least 20% of any extra amount you receive, such as an annual bonus, a tax refund, an inheritance, an unexpected gift, or any other resource that is not part of your regular income, and should grow slowly but steadily until it reaches the equivalent of 2 years of your essential expenses, at which point it will begin to generate its own returns that can be used both to further strengthen your security and to expand your ability to help others sustainably. Rose is building her family legacy fund through small monthly deposits of $50 taken from savings she managed to make by reorganizing her spending and eliminating unnecessary expenses, and she already plans that when this fund reaches $40,000, the monthly returns will be enough to double her tzedakah capacity without compromising her basic financial security. Carl decided to allocate his entire annual tax refund to this fund, in addition to 20% of any extra work he gets as a freelance accountant, and set a goal that in 5 years, this fund will allow him to help at least 10 young people a year with scholarships in his mother's memory. The fifth transformative practice is the financial strength phrases we develop to replace the self-destructive thoughts that arise during grief and often lead us to make harmful economic decisions motivated by guilt, fear, or unprocessed emotional despair. These phrases should be repeated daily, especially in moments of greatest emotional difficulty, and function as mantras that reconnect our conscious mind with the true spiritual principles about money and memory, helping us to resist both the temptation of destructive generosity and the depressive paralysis that prevents our legitimate prosperity. The main phrases that Rose and Carl learned and that I want to teach you are: my financial stability is an honor to my ancestors. Sustainable generosity is true love. To honor the dead is to live with dignity. My prosperity generates blessings for those who have passed. The Eternal wants my order, not my sacrifice. And every dollar well used is a materialized prayer. These phrases should be written on small cards and placed where you will see them frequently, like your wallet, bathroom mirror, refrigerator, computer, and should be repeated whenever you feel tempted to make an impulsive financial decision motivated by grief or the fear of death. There is a moment when every grieving person faces a fundamental choice that will determine not only their financial future, but also how they will truly honor those they love and have lost. And it was exactly this moment that I witnessed when Rose and Carl came to me 6 months ago in a situation that moved me deeply and taught me something revolutionary about the transformative power of Jewish financial wisdom applied to the grieving process. Rose had received an unexpected proposal. A distant cousin offered her the opportunity to sell the house where she lived with Charles for a price well above the market value, an amount that would solve all her financial problems and even give her security for the rest of her life. But it would mean leaving forever the only place where she still felt her husband's presence, where she kept all the physical memories of the life they built together, where every room carried the mark of the love they shared for 30 years. Carl, during the same period, received a job offer in another city that represented exactly the professional opportunity his mother had always dreamed of for him. A position as chief accountant in a multinational corporation, a salary 3 times his current one, a structured career path, all the benefits a seamstress mother could wish for the son she had educated with so much sacrifice. But accepting this offer would mean abandoning the small accounting office he had set up on the same street, where his mother had worked for 40 years, leaving the community where he grew up, and where he felt he could still honor his mother's memory through his constant and familiar presence. Both came to me on the same day, by divine coincidence, with tears in their eyes and the same agonizing dilemma in their hearts: how to distinguish between legitimate emotional attachment and a true opportunity for growth, between honoring the past and building the future, between preserving memories and creating prosperity, between loyalty to the dead and responsibility to the living. It was at this moment that I understood the deepest manifestation of the principle of Zechut Avot, the merit of the ancestors, which teaches us that our deceased loved ones benefit spiritually not when we imprison ourselves in the past out of guilt or longing, but when we use the lessons they taught us to build an increasingly prosperous, balanced, and generous life that multiplies blessings through future generations. I held Rose's hands and looked deep into her eyes, still marked by pain, but now also illuminated by the hope of a new understanding, and said with all the spiritual firmness I could muster, "My child, Charles is not bound to that house out of love for you. He is free in the Olam Haba and wishes for you to find your freedom in this world as well. True loyalty to your love is not remaining physically and geographically in the same place where you were happy, but carrying within your heart the values he taught you and using them to build a new phase of your life that would be a source of pride and joy for him. Sell this house. Establish your definitive financial security. Move to a place where you can be happy again. But take with you the lessons of responsibility, balanced generosity, and dignity that Charles taught you, and allow your prosperity to be a continuous blessing for his soul." Rose cried, but this time her tears were of relief and liberation, not of despair and imprisonment, because she finally understood that financial freedom and emotional loyalty are not contradictory when based on solid spiritual principles instead of unhealthy attachments that hinder growth. To Carl, I explained something even more revolutionary about the concept of Pidyon Shvuyim, the redemption of captives, which in the modern context means using our prosperity to free other people from poverty, ignorance, and lack of opportunity, exactly as his mother had done for him through her sacrifices as a seamstress. "My son, your mother did not work for 40 years for you to remain small in her honor. She worked for 40 years so that you could become great enough to do for others what she did for you. Accept this opportunity, grow professionally, multiply your resources, and use that prosperity to create a scholarship program that will allow hundreds of poor young people to have the opportunities your mother dreamed of for you. Your greatness will be the true tribute to her sacrifices." Carl took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, smiled with true peace in his heart, because he understood that personal growth and filial honor not only can coexist, but actually strengthen each other when based on ancient wisdom about the spiritual purpose of material prosperity. 6 months later, I can share with you the transformative result of these conscious decisions based on the financial principles of Jewish tradition applied to the grieving process in a mature and balanced way. Rose sold the house for $450,000, moved to a smaller, more modern apartment in a neighborhood she had always wanted to explore, invested $380,000 conservatively, generating a monthly income of $3,200 that perfectly complements her retirement, allocated $20,000 to an emergency fund that gives her complete peace of mind, established an annual program of $10,000 for tzedakah in Charles's memory, specifically directed to widows in financial distress, and for the first time since her husband's death, she feels not only financially secure, but also spiritually connected to him through her responsible and generous choices. Carl accepted the job offer, moved to New York City, tripled his monthly income, established the Maria Oliveira Institute for Professional Education, which has already benefited 40 young people from working-class families with full scholarships, created a $100,000 endowment fund that will ensure the Institute's perpetuity, and discovered that his professional prosperity, far from betraying his mother's memory, actually infinitely multiplies the impact of the lessons she taught him about dignity, honest work, and social responsibility. But the deepest transformation I witnessed in both of them was something that transcends numbers and financial values. They discovered the revolutionary difference between grief that imprisons and memory that liberates, between longing that paralyzes and love that propels, between loyalty that diminishes and honor that multiplies. This is the essence of the Jewish teaching on Tekiyat Hametim, the resurrection, which shows us that the true continuity of life does not happen through our stagnation in memory of the dead, but through our constant elevation inspired by the values they taught us and the responsibility to perpetuate their blessings through our own dignified and sustainable achievements. I want you to deeply understand this final and transformative truth. When we truly understand the destiny of the soul after death according to Jewish wisdom, we discover that our responsibility is not to spend everything out of despair, nor to hoard everything out of fear, not to remain small out of false humility, nor to imprison ourselves in the past out of unresolved guilt, but to find the sacred balance that allows us to honor our dead while caring for the living with dignity, creating a financial and spiritual legacy that transcends generations and brings peace to both our grieving hearts and our material lives. Now, I want you to do something very important and transformative that will seal your commitment to this new understanding of grief, memory, and prosperity. Take a piece of paper and a pen, sit in a quiet place, take 3 deep breaths, and write a letter to your deceased loved ones where you specifically commit to honoring their memory through responsible financial choices, balanced generosity, and sustainable prosperity. In this letter, you should thank them for the lessons they taught you about money and life. Ask for forgiveness for any impulsive financial decision you made motivated by unprocessed grief. Set concrete goals for stability and growth that would be a source of pride for them, and promise that you will use your future prosperity to perpetuate the values they most cherished through practical and lasting actions. After writing this letter, read it aloud, keep it in a sacred place, and reread it every anniversary of their passing as part of your financial yahrzeit, always renewing your commitment to transform love into abundance, longing into wisdom, and memory into prosperity that benefits both the living and the dead. Repeat with me this final blessing that will carry you into a new phase of your relationship with money and your deceased loved ones. May my prosperity be an honor to my ancestors. May my generosity be sustainable and balanced. May my financial life reflect the highest values I learned from those I love and lost. And may every conscious choice I make with my resources be a materialized prayer that connects the earthly and spiritual worlds through the transformative power of Jewish wisdom applied with love, responsibility, and dignity for all generations.